Welcome back to the Fitness Devil podcast, guys. Episode number 92. So we missed an episode last week, so we apologize for that. Life got crazy busy. Otherwise, we've had an unbroken streak, but we're back on. So we've got Greg Nuckols today. We brought Greg on to talk about a bunch of, well, in theory, a bunch of fun shit, but then we got off track. We got into neck training for women, preventing concussions. We had a really detailed discussion about grizzly bear versus gorilla and what would actually happen with that. And we imagined Chad Wesley Smith versus Dr. Mike Isertel in that theoretical combat, so you'll have to listen for that. But we also talked about the similarities and differences between men and women in training. We got into Greg's Stronger by Science podcast and how he solidified his following to have a really great start to that. And we talk about our Evolved Canadian Strength Symposium here September 14th and 15th in Edmonton, where Greg is one of our headline presenters. It's a great episode, probably one of the most fun we've ever recorded. Check it out. I hope you'll love it.
Shut up and sit down.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. We actually missed a week. This is kind of the first time in our history. Dean was traveling. We just had so much crazy stuff on that we actually just couldn't put an episode together and get ahead. So this time we've got Greg Nuckols returning with us. And he's taking a momentary break from his master's studies, his continued work at Stronger by Science and speaking engagements, including, and one of the reasons why we brought him back right now, is he's going to appear as a speaker here in Edmonton in September at an event that Dean and I and Dean Somerset, Evolve Strength, where I contract out of, and our friend Hannah Gray are all partnering in. So we want to get Greg back to chat with him. So welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We had all these jokes prepared to call you doctor, and then we forgot it was a master's. So on the long list of doctors we have on our podcast, you don't make that list yet. Possibly one day?
You know, I feel like you just put that in your like anticipated questions as a sneak diss. I think you knew I didn't have a PhD, and you wanted me to humble myself to point that out to you.
Well, I
see the game you're playing, and I'm starting this podcast with hackles raised, as defensive as you can get. This is going to be a very adversarial hour of conversation, and I hope you're prepared.
How is it at the office with Trexler? Does he poke a lot of jokes? Like how you're under him and stuff in terms of education? I feel like science guys would use that like really wholeheartedly.
No, most of the jokes we have, he jokes that I'm like a slave master type boss, which literally couldn't be further from the truth. Like my managerial style is just kind of to say like, here's some stuff we need to get done. Do it however you see fit in as much time as you need to accomplish it. And
do you think that would change if you were a doctor? Like having that title, do you think that you would change as a person? Like I know a lot of people get famous and they changed, and their friends say they changed. Like, do you think that'd be you?
No, I mean if you can feasibly ask people to call you either master or doctor, you can't tell me that master's not going to go to your head more.
I agree. You're right. Doctor is way worse than master. Because if you force someone to be like, no, you refer to me as master, it would be way better.
Master Greg Nuckols.
Master Greg.
Yeah, that's like some 50 Shades of Grey shit.
Like every one of your employees has like a contract.
Because I can already picture you with your hackles up today. Probably got into the closet and got, creative anachronism, like a set of probably real chainmail. I wouldn't be shocked if you had like some sort of like sword and chainmail and helmet.
You call me master. Like what? I came here to like write articles and like help you out. No. In your chainmail and sword.
Well,
we painted this whole picture. We painted this whole picture out of nothing. I didn't even think about this. This has been awesome.
I can see Greg wearing chainmail. They're kind of scary, actually. I want to see a video of you, so I was told, I can't remember who the hell said this, something about, it was Dean Somerset at a recent thing that him and Tony Gentlecourt did here in town. They were talking about pause squats, and something about you squatting 500 pounds, pause, and reciting Robert Frost poetry. Is that true?
Yeah. So I like doing breathing pause squats where like you squat down, you exhale and get like full deep breaths in the hole and come back up. Um, I found that one that helped me improve depth, and two that helped me with bracing a lot. I think I was super reliant on intra-abdominal pressure just to kind of hold my torso together in the squat. And so by doing breathing pause squats, then, when you exhale, you're taking away a lot of that intra-abdominal pressure, and it actually forces like the intrinsic spinal muscles to stabilize the spine the way it's supposed to. So I found that very, very beneficial. And I didn't have I don't know, like a stopwatch type deal where I could have that in front of the squat rack to keep an eye on. I mean, I could use a phone, but I have pretty bad vision, even with contacts. So I wouldn't have been able to see the screen. And so when I'm trying to go kind of heavy on breathing pause squats, I don't really trust myself to count 20 or 30 seconds in my head because, the heavier the weight is, the faster you count pretty much.
Yeah.
And it's hard to be consistent on that. So what I do to make sure it's a consistent time down there is I recite The Road Less Traveled by Robert Frost, because it's about as long as I would want it to be. And, I I'm not spitting poetry like fucking Eminem and Rap God. So, and I'm not practicing talking faster. So it winds up being a pretty consistent amount of time to be down in the hole. So
that's your advice, because I would agree that I think most people, myself included, if you post a pause squat, you're like, oh yeah, 3 seconds in the hole, and it was like 1 or half a second.
Yeah.
And to give people context, because I'm a pretty good squatter, but not on Greg's level, because Greg is a legendary powerlifter. He's basically taking my max squat ever and sitting down there for 30 seconds reciting poetry. So that just kind of gives you an idea of how strong he is.
Yeah.
Let's actually go with some of our questions. So, Greg,
it's like, we brought you on to talk about things.
Yeah, okay.
Not just make fun of you.
That was actually way more interesting. I don't think that was making fun. I think it was actually making him look really good. So, I like this one. You recently wrote a post about, as a younger man who no one knew in our industry, you'd reach out to industry pros. Sometimes they wouldn't respond at all. And other times they direct you to, the answer's in this ebook or this thing that you can pay for. So you resolved to answer everything that anyone ever asked you as you gained notoriety, but then only to realize how fucked up and daunting that task actually has become due to your own limited time. So how do you suggest that busy professionals navigate this sort of stuff? And what do you want your followers to understand about your time and ability to respond?
I mean, I still respond to almost everything. I just, so I approach most things from a fairly utilitarian perspective, and it's kind of like a subjective assessment, right, of what's going to be more valuable to me and the person I'm responding to. Like, is the answer to this question that I'm responding to for this person, is that going to provide them more value than it will cost me in time to answer that question? And assuming it's not going to take a long time to answer the question, I think pretty much always they will derive more utility from you answering the question than you will lose from spending the time to answer it. And so I think that it's almost always a good thing, ethically speaking, and not that this is a huge moral dilemma, just in terms of a basic utility function, if you approach ethics from a utilitarian perspective, which I do. Anyway, so I think that in general, I have some sort of like obligation to answer most of these questions. So I do. And it's just that like a lot of them, like, so most of them, like, I can answer in 30 seconds, maybe a minute tops. Everything's fine. But there are quite a few questions that I'll get like on a day-to-day basis where it's like, okay, like it's probably going to take me, 600-700 words to type out an adequate response to this. And so as a result, like a pretty significant portion of my workday every day is just, going through Facebook messages and messages on Reddit or Instagram or whatever, and answering questions, a lot of emails as well. And so the just like quick little answers to questions like that doesn't bother me at all. But the ones that do take like more thought and time to type out a response to, I think that a lot of those take more time because they're good questions. And I think they're questions that a lot of other people would benefit from knowing the answer to. So what I decided I'm going to do is like the basic questions I'm going to keep answering, which is like 80% of the stuff that people ask me. But then the more in-depth ones, I'm just going to keep them on a list. And every other week, me and Trex are going to put out a podcast episode that's just like purely a Q&A episode.
Yeah.
Where we, answer those questions. And our first one just dropped today, actually. I don't know when this episode's going to be coming up, but it dropped Thursday, June 6th. And I think we took an hour to answer like 5 questions. And that otherwise would have been, probably 45 minutes of typing to answer that same number of questions. But now, like, we can get those answers out to a lot of people. So I feel ethically okay with it. Like, the people still get the answer to their question, if maybe not immediately, because it's going to take us a while to get to all of them on the podcast. But then also, like, other people can benefit from those answers. But
I think this is fantastic. And actually, you said what I thought was like, are you going to take those longer form things and turn around and create like Facebook posts or content out of it? And to answer something else too. So yeah, so this episode, people will be listening to this Thursday, June 6th, if they grab it on day 1. So for anyone listening, one of the reasons we brought Greg on is to let you guys know that him and Eric Trexler do have their own podcast for Stronger by Science now. And it's a really great piece of like information, to say the least. So go check it out. If you're someone who likes Greg and follows Greg especially, and you haven't checked it out yet, like, you just go do it. Go download that episode next after this one, because if you're a podcast listener, chances are you will.
Well, it's
so
just
go
kinda,
support it.
It's kind of interesting too, because again, the more you put it out there in a forum where more people are reading it, you probably won't get the same questions. But it's kind of unique in the sense that having a podcast, you can answer questions a bit different than you would in text, and they would come off like the answers probably be more meaningful, if that makes sense. Because with text, sometimes it's hard to like read into kind of what you're saying or the context. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I mean, also with the podcast, me and Eric are recording that in conversation, and so a fair amount of the questions, like, he has more insight than I do. Because especially if it's something like nutrition or body comp related, I know more information about those topics than
just like, so everyone knows.
Well, no, I mean, like, I don't consider that in my area of expertise, but like, do I know more about those topics than like most people in the industry? Like, probably, but I don't have like an expert level of knowledge on those topics, and Eric does. So, so I think that people end up getting a better answer than they would if it was just me as well.
I love it. I think it's great. Now, speaking of expert knowledge,
we're even doing all the questions?
Hell yeah! Well,
okay,
I just segued it to you.
Oh,
so he dropped the pass, is what he did.
And
he's a football guy. He dropped the pass.
To be completely blunt, and you'll probably come up with your own little method, is we print out stuff, and my printer only had enough paper the ink only had enough for one. So we're sharing one. So our system got fucked up because, like anyone who's really well prepared, you print out scripts 5 minutes before you do it.
He's been asking me to bring him paper.
Yeah.
And that's how...
So hopefully you learn from this. You're going to be a much better podcast, I think. You got two scientists. You'll have it down. We're just two meatheads. So you provide a lot of information about the similarities and differences between men and women in training. And that's kind of where we want to go with this, is kind of what are the, I guess, important differences between the sexes that affect training and programming, and where do you see the need for women to approach it differently, or at all?
Yeah, so probably the biggest difference, just right off the bat, is that men tend to be bigger and have quite a bit more muscle when they start training. And so as a result, if you look at the research looking at like relative strength gains and gains in muscle in men and women in response to training, actually pretty similar. On kind of like a percentage basis. Yeah. So, but as a result, since men are bigger and stronger just naturally pre-training, absolute gains in muscle and strength in men are considerably larger. So kind of like the magnitude of results is going to be different. But in terms of like physiological differences that may impact how you have to program for people, one is that women have, on average, have a higher proportion of type 1 muscle fibers. And due to higher levels of estrogen, they spare glycogen a little bit better, tend to be able to maintain aerobic metabolism at slightly higher relative exercise intensity. So like the point that they break over into anaerobic primarily metabolism is a little bit later. And several other things as well. But as a result, women tend to be a little bit less fatigable than men are. And so one of the things you'll see is that with, especially with like lighter weights, women tend to be able to do more like sets to failure or reps to failure with like a given percentage of their 1 rep max, probably recover a little bit quicker between sets. So if a dude does like a hard set of 5 squats and needs to rest like 2 or 3 minutes to be able to recover for the next set, that may only be like 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes for a woman. Possibly capable of training with higher training volumes, both in terms of like what they can actually manage within a session. And then there's also some research suggesting that maybe women recover a little bit faster than men, or can do higher volume in a session while still recovering in the same amount of time. There's some conflicting research on that though, but in terms of programming training, women may be able to train with higher volumes than men, both in terms of what they can handle in a session and what they can recover from. One other like consideration you need to make though is that there's a fair amount of evidence that the menstrual cycle affects some stuff. In terms of how it actually affects performance, the research is kind of all over the place on that. So like some studies show that there's a small peak in force output around the time of ovulation, for example, but then other research shows that that's not there. And a lot of that is just looking at like single joint isometric strength. So I'm not going to put too many eggs in that basket. Yeah. But in terms of outcomes of training, there are like 3 or 4 studies looking at like concentrating training during the follicular phase, which is like from the onset of menses until ovulation, versus concentrating training during the luteal phase of training, which is from ovulation until the onset of menses. And that research finds that women just respond to training better like they build more muscle and gain more strength with training concentrated during the follicular phase rather than the luteal phase. And so potentially, and I don't know that you'd even have to worry about this for someone on hormonal contraceptives, but for women not on hormonal contraceptives, it's probably not a terrible idea to, like, if you have like if you run like monthly mesocycles, for example, it may not be a terrible idea to put like the highest volume, most stressful training that is likely to cause the largest adaptations during the follicular phase. So like from the onset of menses until ovulation. And then if you run something like 5-3-1 where you train for 3 weeks and then deload on the fourth, probably not a terrible idea for that deload on the fourth week to be one of the 2 weeks during the luteal phase, just because they're probably not having as large of an adaptive response to training during the luteal phase in the first place. And then this isn't really going to, well, actually, no, this probably should affect how you program a little bit. It's probably also not a terrible idea to do more direct hamstring work with your female clients. I mean, direct hamstring work is good for everyone, but so women have higher rates of ACL injuries. Oh, and this is probably only relevant if you train like female athletes, like basketball players, soccer players, etc. Most people aren't going to just like tear their ACL in day-to-day life. But if you train female athletes, men tend to have a like greater hamstring strength relative to quad strength, like pre-training. Like women have a greater imbalance in terms of like quad to hamstring strength ratio on average. And also may have a little worse neuromuscular control of their hamstrings, which is like necessary to pull back on their tibia to balance the anterior shear that can be created, or like the anterior forces on the knee that can stress the ACL. And so women are probably going to benefit a little bit more from direct hamstring training, and also just like neuromuscular training to improve like landing mechanics and cutting mechanics, just in an effort to prevent non-contact ACL injuries. So like for the most part, if a dude tears his ACL, like it's just purely a freak accident and fairly rare, but I feel comfortable saying most female athletes would probably benefit from a combination of direct hamstring training and like neuromuscular training on landing mechanics and cutting mechanics to help prevent non-contact ACL injuries. Another thing, which I don't really foresee many coaches actually doing with their female athletes, but that they probably should do with their female athletes, is direct neck training. Reason for that is there's some research suggesting that neck training can decrease concussion risk. And when people think concussion, they often think like football, like American football, like the NFL, and the huge concussion issue with football, which like, yeah, that's definitely a thing. And that's primarily a men's sport. But when you compare sports that both men and women compete in, so like basketball or soccer, women have way higher concussion rates than men do. Basically, because I don't want to state this too strongly. One of the leading hypotheses is that women have weaker necks than men do. And so, like, if two dudes like run into each other at high speed on the soccer pitch, like their heads may whip back a little bit, but not whip back hard enough to jiggle their brain around and give them a concussion. And if women do, like their necks are just weaker on average. And so like they're more likely for their head to whip hard enough to sustain a concussion from it. So like most women aesthetically, the look they're not going for is like thick neck, like
big traps.
So I understand that you're probably going to have a hard time getting buy-in from your female athletes on that. But in terms of concussion prevention, probably not a bad idea to have female athletes do neck training. Not a terrible idea for most people to do neck training. One, just because a thick neck looks sick. Two, because like you can never care too much about concussion prevention for athletes. But like if you were going to do direct neck training for one sex or the other, like if for whatever reason you had to make that choice, you'd probably get more relative benefit from doing it with female athletes than male athletes.
You'd have to trick them. You'd have to do like hip thrusts with like weights on their head, and then get them to move their neck. Just like don't tell them what it is. Like, oh, it'll get more legs.
And except don't do that, because that would be unethical. Because when a woman shows up with this blocky neck that she's really upset about, you're gonna have a bad time.
Yeah, so. But she won't have a concussion.
Get buy-in.
Hey, Greg said it ethically. I'm good with it. In my head.
Get your female athletes to buy into the whole
Greg just lost a whole bunch of people. They're like, that's why there's neck training in my program.
Plus, I mean, realistically, how much hypertrophy are you going to see in the neck muscles of a woman to the point where she looks like, quote, bulky there? That's going to be difficult to probably achieve.
I think that should be Greg's next platform. I think.
I don't know, man. Only one way to find out. No, I mean, I don't see a reason why you shouldn't expect robust neck muscle hypertrophy in women as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see why it would be different from any other muscle, so I would expect it to respond relatively the same way that men's do. So, like, maybe would never get big enough to just look like super thick, like Brock Lesnar style, but you know, in terms of like relative to their starting point, I would expect that relative neck muscle hypertrophy would be pretty similar.
Okay.
It would be like, you know, like the women don't want to get bulky myth that always flies around. That would like expedite that completely. They'd be like, what if I get bulky? And then you're coming in here like, oh, you should expect to get a bigger neck. They'd be like, fuck, it's true.
All your female athletes are doing 8 sets of shrugs per workout.
You're probably right,
like,
though.
Not like trap training, like actual direct neck training.
But in my head, all the women are doing. They're trying to look like Brock Lesnar. Like, could you imagine that? Like, you could save the world from a lot of concussions. Because I do agree. I think that I think that the rates are higher. So.
I don't think this is going to be a giant problem. But
you don't have to think they're higher.
Yeah,
like,
they're
absolutely higher.
I wonder what it's like in hockey, too. Like, I wonder if
science is true whether you believe it or not, Deeds.
Well, I wonder what it's like in hockey, too, though, because they have, like, the pads and the helmet. Like, that'd be interesting. Anyways, neck training. I like it. I did not expect that part of it.
That's
cool. Makes total sense.
This is why we bring Greg on. I don't know if you've ever talked about neck training for women before, ever on a podcast, so...
That's going to be my new question. It's going to be in his inbox.
Let's go to... Yeah, keep sending him stupid messages in his inbox. Keep him busy. So it flips this now. What are some of the brand and marketing claims about the differences in men's and women's training that sound kind of cool, don't really make a fucking difference, and where you can safely treat everyone with the same principles?
I think that's more or less true. So I think that in terms of what you'd actually be applying to a program and the things you would need to look out for, I think the differences within each sex are probably bigger than the differences between sexes. So even if there are, like, on average, some differences between men and women, I don't think you can kind of proactively take that and say, like, oh, okay, so we're going to program training way differently for men and women. There's the differences within sex are large enough such that you should probably just approach everyone as individuals in the first place. Like, probably the clearest difference is the difference in kind of like strength endurance and fatigability, but I mean, there are absolutely dudes who are less fatigable than like the average female client. And so, you know, you're not going to, and there are absolutely women who are more fatigable than the average male client. So like you just kind of need to take it on a person by person basis. And yeah, I would say on average, the way you would approach men and women is pretty similar. And then when you approach people as individuals. Like on average, there will probably be some differences in how you train your men and women. But I don't think that those differences are probably going to be large enough or consistent enough that you should just make the assumption that like, oh, I have a woman, I'm going to train her this way, or oh, I have a man, I'm going to train him this way, with those two ways being substantially different.
So you don't subscribe to Tracy Anderson's methods about creating long, lean-looking muscles and not touching heavy weight?
Surprisingly, no.
What if, maybe this is more applicable because like you're kind of known for this. How, like, trainer comes in, he asks you a question on Q&A, but like, how do you find whether or not your female athletes like essentially have that work capacity? Like, how are you building that into it on an individual basis to kind of see where I can push them in regard to like that specific type of training?
So one of the things I do is how I like to kind of determine volume for an individual and also training loads is I'll prescribe like, you're going to be training today at 75% of your max. You're going to be doing sets of 5 and like have at it and just kind of. So let me preface this by saying this probably wouldn't work particularly well in terms of being just like a typical personal trainer and you have like an hour with a client. So you need to know exactly how long everything's going to take. I mostly train powerlifters and they tend to be fairly open-ended with how long they're willing to train because like they take it pretty seriously. But so what I'll say is like, okay, today we're going 75%. We're going to do sets of 5 and just do sets of 5 until you reach an RPE of, if it's supposed to be an easier day, maybe an RPE of 8. If it's supposed to be a harder day, maybe RPE of 9. And so the net effect of that is if someone has better strength endurance, like they just end up doing more sets until they reach that target RPE. And so in that way, like the people I train who have better strength endurance, whether they're men or women, just wind up doing more sets than the people who have like worse strength endurance and recover more poorly between sets. And I can also use that to progress training loads. So I could say like, okay, for individual A, they aren't very fatigable. They have pretty good strength endurance. So if they like take this certain weight, or like if they take this percentage for like this number of reps and do more than 8 sets with it, they're probably stronger than I thought they were. It's time to bump this training max up. For someone who maybe has a little bit worse strength endurance, maybe instead of like 8 sets, it's more like 5 sets. And it's like, okay, when they're clearing 5 sets, then they're probably a little stronger. I can bump their training max up. Then if it's someone who is more like getting close to a competition and not more off season, so I care more about intensity than volume, I can put those set cutoffs like a little bit lower. And so then the net effect of what will happen is the training max will get bumped up a little quicker for the person with better strength endurance. So they wind up doing training that looks fairly similar, like they're doing the same number of reps for the same number of sets, but that allows me to progress them to like training with higher percentages of their actual max for the same general style of training. And so, yeah, if I leave things kind of open-ended, what I see on average is my female lifters doing like more sets with a given percentage of their 1 rep max for the same number of reps. Or if I keep the number of sets like constrained and bump up training maxes to accommodate for that, the women end up doing like the same number of reps per set for the same number of sets with like a slightly higher percentage of their actual max. But like I said, there's a fair amount of variability within sexes for that as well. And so I just like put a system in place that I don't have to make assumptions about my lifters. Like their performance guides, like what their training ends up looking like.
You'd be a good guy to ask. Have you ever dabbled with any of the velocity stuff, like speed cutoffs for RPE, I guess, as like a proxy, more objective proxy, I guess?
So I've dabbled with it. I don't do that with my lifters, mainly because
Cost one thing.
For velocity stuff to work, you need to make sure you're getting good data.
Yeah.
And so one of the things is you need to know that the person is lifting every rep as fast as possible.
Yeah.
If they're kind of being lackadaisical, like that'll show, velocity's lower, you're getting more fatigued, like this is a higher percentage of your max. And it's not. Like they could just move it faster, but they aren't.
Yeah.
And so I would have to have like a pretty high level of trust with a lifter, especially for like online training, for me to trust that when I say lift everything as fast as possible, they are actually doing that. And then also, like money is a big thing, because like there's been research looking at like the reliability and accuracy of a lot of the devices on the market, and the ones that are just kind of like magnetic things that you can just stick to the weights, or like just a little band with like a Bluetooth connection that you can put on the bar. Those tend to not work that well. Like they're all right. Like they're better than a random number generator, but like they do have some accuracy and reliability issues. The ones where it's actually like a string attached to like a pulley, and you put it on the bar. So something like a Tendo unit or a GymAware. Those are the ones that are really quite accurate. But like Tendos and GymAwares are really, really expensive.
Well, in
They're
Canada,
several $1,000s.
In Canada, it's like $4,000 to get a GymAware, and like it's the only one that's reliable at slow speeds. So it's kind of
Yeah, and so God, there's another thing on the market, and I always blank on the name of it. It might be called like Rep 1 or something.
Yeah, it's the barrel one that Chris Duffin, the first iteration, I think he bought all of them or something. But I think it's called Bar 1 now.
That's where they went to? Okay.
So that's the story. I can't even remember if Chris confirmed it, but I guess he bought out all of them for his online training platform because he was velocity based and it was the only one that worked. But they're a small company, so he literally bought all of them. That's why they don't have them on their thing.
Yeah, so that explains why they were out of stock forever.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I want to say Rep 1 is what, like a couple $100? Like it's pretty affordable. So like if they ever like actually go back on the market, I may start recommending that to more people. But yeah, for the most part, like I'm not going to ask people to drop $3,000 for a piece of equipment. And I don't really trust the other type of product on the market that much.
Here, female powerlifter, you're using the GymAware and you're doing dedicated neck training. That's basically your platform now, and I'm sticking to it.
That's gonna be a very niche clientele.
Greg's totally going off the powerlifting scene, and like he's like rebranding. You're the neck guy.
Well, I mean, Brett Contreras is the glute guy. Yeah. Like, why hasn't anybody become?
Greg is the trap. Greg is the trap guy. It could be a thing. You just need bigger traps, I think.
Oh, and I could say that all of the women I train are trap queens. And when people land on my website, it's like a MySpace page from like 2005, and like Fetty Wap starts playing, and man, yeah,
it could be a good side gig.
This is a whole brand idea.
It could be a good side gig,
this.
And it's backed by science. Like it's basically the glute guy, but the trap guy. It'll probably go the wrong way, like kind of like Instagram, where like everyone has huge asses now. Everyone's gonna have massive necks, and then like the dichotomy between that, you could literally change the world. Like females may have massive necks from here on out. I like it.
You know, I'm not gonna lie. I think that would also double as like self-defense training, because if you're going through the world and you happen upon someone who has like just a really, really fucking thick neck.
Yeah,
you don't want to pick a fight with that person.
I agree.
Like even if that person's never fought in their life and they're like the nicest person, Like, you just see that person and you're like, I don't want to fight this guy. Or I suppose it could be, I don't want to fight this gal. Because you just see that neck and you're like,
you probably saw
if
this.
this starts going down, I can cock them in the head and it's not going to do shit. Like, their head's going nowhere. It's going to break my fist. Like, I just don't want to mess with this person. So I think that having a thick neck functions as self-defense training.
So this came up like recently you probably saw it, this fucking like grizzly bear versus the gorilla talk, and I think it got re-brought up recently.
I saw it, yeah.
And Brad Dieter commented on, like, he said something stupid like, gorillas know they're gonna choke them out. He's gonna choke the bear out. And someone was like, do you know the fucking neck on the bear? Like, that's not gonna happen. But like, it makes sense. Like,
that shouldn't even be a discussion. Like, especially if it's like a grizzly bear.
Yeah,
like,
it was a grizzly bear.
The bear wins hands down. That's not even that wouldn't even be a fight.
But there was a whole, like, I can't remember who wrote the article.
The bear's like 4 times bigger than the gorilla, and so people are like, oh, but like the gorilla has opposable thumbs, like it would be able to like out wrestle the bear. It's like, if you've ever seen bear cubs play, like all they do is like wrestle 24/7. Like, adult bears don't really need to wrestle because they're the biggest thing they ever come up against, so they can just kind of like kill people with a single touch, essentially. But like, if it comes to a wrestling match, like, I bet that bear has more wrestling experience than the gorilla does. Like, plus the fact it's fucking 4 times bigger. Like, gorillas are big, but grizzly bears are fucking huge. Like, it's not even a discussion. Like, the bear wins hands down.
We could probably
hands down.
create a human proxy of this, and we just need Chad Wesley Smith to fight Dr. Mike Israetel. And Israetel's the gorilla.
Yeah,
but Wesley Smith.
And they both do. Yeah, no. This was the argument with that. So the perfect. You have that fight, but the guy who wrote the article, like, it was super scientific. You'd probably like it. Was like, it would be the equivalent of like Chad Wesley Smith versus Israetel, but give him Wolverine fangs. Like, give him Wolverine fangs. They have claws. He's gonna fuck him up.
Okay, that would be
so like
that would be
a
great pay-per-view.
Yeah. Like, I'm glad Greg has the same opinion. Like, I'm always looking for confirmation bias, but like, that was my...
The other thing I was going to say is I love when some idiot decides to pick a fight with a woman who turns out to be like a UFC fighter or some other really talented...
Those are good videos. I know it's like, I don't like to see it, but like, it makes me happy.
It would be... People don't understand how fucking big grizzly bears are. It wouldn't be Chad Wesley Smith versus Mike Israetel, because Chad is approximately 50% larger than Mike is. Like, where, like, that would be the mountain. That would be like, that would be like, Chad would be like the grizzly bear, and Mike might be like a black bear.
Yeah.
If you're actually talking like a grizzly bear versus gorilla, it would be like Chad Wesley Smith versus someone who weighs 80 pounds.
like
Peter Dinklage. Who's Tyrion?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Find someone who looks like Peter Dinklage, but is like an expert in fighting.
The Mountain, if Game of Thrones-esque, that'd be the Mountain vs. Tyrion.
Yeah, that's the size difference you're talking about. Like, grizzly bears are enormous.
I love that we got here. I don't even know how it happened.
That was your fault, but that was great.
It totally makes sense, though, with where we're going. Because he said trap queen, and bears have traps. Let's talk about your podcast. Let's talk about podcasting in some form and like Instagram influencing. Because that's like
the question.
Your first episode of the Stronger by Science podcast, we corrected it. You had 15,000 downloads, not 10. And this doesn't happen without a strong base of support, loyal following, all that. But what have you done over the recent years to solidify the following without jumping on? Our favorite thing to jump on is the IG Instagram influencing bandwagon. Like, you're not that. How the hell did you do it? What happened?
I mean, I do have an Instagram. Like,
but you haven't shown booty. Well,
that's true.
That's my generalization, but
so I don't know. This may be kind of a cop-out answer, but I think that I think people focus way too much on how large their following is and not why people are following you in the first place. And I think that if your primary goal is to entertain people, so if the stuff you put out isn't going to be very like challenging, it doesn't take a much like actual focus for people to get what you're saying. Maybe they see it and like they laugh a little bit and whatever. Like it's silly, it's nice bite-sized content. Like that's probably going to be pretty good for getting you a lot of eyes and getting a big audience. But then like they're worried more about like kind of being entertained by you. Like that's why they follow you in the first place. And like I just don't do that.
Yeah.
I'm not a very entertaining person. And so like the people that follow me and like follow the website and whatnot, like, you know, if someone's like on my email list or like they follow the stuff I put out on social media, like they know that like, oh, when Greg shares something, it's probably going to be like 4,000 words and super dense. And yet they still follow me. Like they follow me as an information source, not as an entertainment source. And so like, you know, if someone has like 500,000 followers on Instagram, and then they put out like a really like dense article or something like that, like they could maybe expect like 4% of their audience to read it, like if they were lucky, because those people are there for the booty pics or like the infographics or whatever.
Softcore porn.
Yeah, essentially softcore porn.
I know it's
but
horrible, but like it's true.
The people that follow me don't follow me for entertainment. They follow me for information. And so like if I put out a really dense article, like about half of the people that follow me are there's a good chance that they're going to read that. Like we have a little over 100,000 people on our email list, and anytime we put out a new article, about 50,000 people read it in the first week.
I'm sure you've been told that, but that's pretty. That's like world class click rates, I'd assume, because isn't it like 4% is the norm? That's insane.
Oh yeah, I mean our email analytics are pretty crazy.
Did you do it planned? Like and honest, like did was this kind of not calculated, because that sounds like a bad word, but were you planning your audience this way in the sense that you kind of had your ethics and morals laid out, that you're like, I'm going to do it this way because I think it will work out? Because you couldn't have known that you were going to have this audience at the beginning. You know what I mean?
No, it wasn't intentional. So here's what I did. Here's what was intentional. There were a few people in the fitness industry like putting out the type of content that I liked when I got into the whole thing. But like a lot of them were on like the training side of things. Like I think quote unquote evidence-based fitness came to like sport nutrition way before it came to training. Yeah. And so like there just weren't that many people putting out the type of content that I wanted to read. And you know, I think it came to like hypertrophy training before it came to strength training as well. And so like for me as a powerlifter, there just weren't people putting out like powerlifting type information that was what I personally wanted to read. Yeah. So I was just like, you know what? Fuck it. If other people aren't going to do it, I guess I'm going to do it. And so like my whole plan going in was just like, you know, I get that I'm kind of weird, but I'm sure there's other people out there who are weird in a similar way to me. So like if I just put out the content that I would personally want to read, and if I conduct myself online in a way that I personally don't find weird and cringy, like hopefully there will be other people who come across the content and they're like, oh, this is good. This is what I want to read. Or they'll come across me online and be like, oh, like this guy isn't weird and cringy like a lot of fitness people. So cool. Like I'll read his stuff. I'll follow him. So it was basically just like, I don't know, just putting out the stuff that I want to read and finding people like me. Like that was pretty much how it went.
A big thing I remember, I think the first time I was exposed to you was, again, it kind of plays into that whole, like, you're going to get the audience you wanted. I was pretty serious about powerlifting. And I can't remember where I got your squat thing from. I like opened it and it was like 100 pages. And I was like, holy shit, who the fuck is this? And anyways, like, I'm sure a lot of people open that and they're like, oh my God, this is what I've been looking for, because it wasn't really there. Like, there's people talking about squats, but you started talking about science, and then all these meatheads are like, whoa, there's science involved with this? And
yeah, so I think one thing that people overlook is like they assume that if someone's putting out really, really like dense scientific content, that they're just trying to like impress other trainers or other people in the industry, but like the actual potential clients or customers or just like day-to-day lifters, like, you know, it's going to go over their heads. Like they're not into it. And I think that people who think that way have never met someone who's actually invested in a hobby.
Yeah.
So like the other thing other than lifting that I'm very into is cooking. And like I know like a lot of the science and chemistry that goes into like making food, because like that information is out there. A lot of the more successful people like in the culinary space are like getting really into like pretty dense science stuff, but they're not making content for other chefs. They're making content for like home cooks who are really into cooking. Or if you follow like the whole analytics crowd in like basketball or baseball, like they're not putting out like dense information on like advanced stats for players for the benefit of like front office executives who may stumble across their blog. Like they're putting it out for fans who are actually into like the science and the data analytics, and they get like, you know, huge audiences, like hundreds of thousands of readers. So like if someone's really into a hobby, like they not everyone, but a lot of people want to know about it on like a nitty gritty level, like maybe not a professional scientist level, but they certainly care about knowing stuff in depth. And so, yeah, like I think a lot of people kind of shot themselves in the foot because they're like, yeah, most people aren't going to be into this content. Like they just assumed that people who are into lifting are fundamentally different than people who are into literally any other hobby out there, and that there's just not an audience of people who care about in-depth information. And, you know, I found that there very much is. And also, like, since it's so analytic, like, one of the things I'll say, this was purely accidental, but from like a business side of things, it did work out pretty well, because the average, like the typical reader of my site is someone who is into strength training, who is either like in IT or engineering. And people in IT and engineering have pretty good salaries. And so like,
you did not even know that when you did that.
Like, do what?
I said you did not expect that one, but that makes logical sense.
No. Yeah, like that's not, like, I didn't plan on that on the front end. But yeah, so I found that there were a lot of people who cared about like analytical stuff, like learning about lifting very in depth, and a lot of the people who fall into that demographic also are probably on like the high end of the income scale of people who are into lifting. And so like neither of those things were planned, but they both worked out really well.
And I think the deeper message there is you just got to be yourself. I know it sounds like we talk about authenticity, but like that's about as authentic as you can get. I just like that stuff.
It goes back to the little dig we made at Instagram influencers, where I think a lot of that are people who are trying to fit a mold or be something, whereas a lot of our friends, peers, a lot of people we look up to in the industry, they're very successful because they didn't pull out a course to try to copy or model anyone else. They just were really true and authentic to what they were interested in. And I was going to ask, for a few examples of people that you thought were good examples of ones who were putting out the kind of information that you said there wasn't a lot of. And, you can think of someone like Brett Contreras, who, just was really passionate about getting his ideas out. If anyone's ever listened to Brett, he's kind of like a little kid and gets really excited about talking about it. And Brett's got a massive following. That was not planned. And he did not follow the Instagram influencer model. It just so happens that his content is so interesting and it's of a subject matter that a lot of people happen to want to know more about, and therefore he's really popular. So are there any other good examples of people who you feel like have been doing this well for a while?
Oh man. So I kind of dislike making lists like this because I know that a lot of people I like I will not include.
Yes. That's okay. You're off the hook.
So let me preface this by saying this is nowhere close to an exhaustive list.
Mm-hmm.
But let's see. So all of the guys I work with, I personally think are great. Eric Trexler, Eric Helms, Mike Zordos.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess Zordos doesn't really put out any information except for mass, but Eric Helms and Eric Trexler for sure. I think Brad Dieter is great.
Yeah.
I think Dean Somerset is great. I agree that Brett is great. Chris Beardsley doesn't get as much attention as I think he deserves. Like I think he puts out really good stuff. Someone who is way too slept on is Danny Lennon.
Right.
I forget if we were talking about this on the actual podcast or before we started, but he's someone who I feel like a lot of people have kind of pigeonholed as a podcaster. Like they know that he has a good podcast and asks good questions, but like the dude himself is like, Danny's really bright. Like he knows a lot about everything, which is required to ask good questions about everything.
I think it's a perfect example of what I was talking about. So off air, we were talking about me personally not wanting to quote get pigeonholed as a podcaster. Like I have an extensive training experience with clientele in front of me. Something north of 13,000 training hours. I'm writing for T Nation now. We've got this, and we'll talk about it in a second, this big event that we've organized coming up here in Edmonton. Your example's perfect. Danny's brilliant. And if you actually listen to him on Sigma Nutrition Radio, if you guys want to go check his stuff out, I think it's the preeminent nutrition, scientific-based nutrition podcast in our industry. I absolutely would say that. And Danny himself, you can forget that this guy actually is really brilliant and does his own great work. Because if you're following that podcast casually, you see the podcaster first, if that makes sense. So, perfect example.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of people like those are just the first that come to mind, but yeah.
I mean, that's a list that's probably 200 or 300 people long. Yeah, so I don't think anybody's going to be offended when we forget it. There's a couple names I was going to.
I mean, I could pull up the list of people who Trex and I are planning on inviting onto the podcast. Like it's, I forget exactly how many people long it is, but with the assumption that we're going to have an interview every 2 weeks, we have 20 years worth of people on the list that we want to get to.
Bring them
if that kind of gives an idea of how long it is.
Yeah, there's two more names I was going to throw out there I think just need to be said. Dr. Mike Isertel is one of them, and Dr. Brad Schoenfeld. These Schoenfeld, especially when it comes to hypertrophy research and just creating good information for a long time. But let's actually move on to what I mentioned about our event that's coming up here in September. So we're doing a run on guests on the podcast who are speaking at our Evolve Canadian Strength Symposium. That's here in Edmonton, Alberta, and that's on September 14th and 15th this year. So we're going to do a run on these guests for next few weeks. We just had Carolyn McDonald, so she's at examine.com, so she's our first of that list. And so you're coming here to speak, and as I was telling you in person, what we try to create, you're actually the person that we wanted as the linchpin to all this, because you checked a lot of boxes that we were trying to have. Your background in powerlifting, recognized and respected speaker. It's mostly Canadian speakers, but we bring up two Americans, you and Lee Peel.
Lucky you.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
So when we founded this idea, we bandied about names. We got most of the people we wanted. There's a couple of people who just weren't available or had to bow out. But you really were the first person. I think Greg would be the person who sets the tone for this event that appeals to a pretty broad audience. So let's see.
What tone is this? I don't feel like I set a particularly good tone for a serious event.
Well,
let's start there. Like I wouldn't even say a tone. I think that based on what we talked about with your following and everything, we already know that you're not coming out like The Rock and setting out coming out the fireworks. You'll be super humble, but I think that it goes with your following is that the people who look at your content really do like it. So, which is huge.
Let's actually
it's not fake.
Let's go to that, and then I'll get back to the original question. You're down to earth. You can sit down and have a beer with you, as I have.
You just gonna compliment them the whole time? Fuck
Yeah.
this
Well,
guy.
what we're gonna do? Like insult him the whole time? Come on.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah,
Wait till he gets here for that.
Yeah.
The event is not just about great information. A lot of events have great information, great speakers. We definitely set out to do that. This event is also about bringing a lot of people together, bringing speakers to our Edmonton community, which is huge, and bringing guests from all over the industry, all over North America. Alberto Alvarez is going to come from Spain, so no one has an excuse. And I want people to actually meet each other and network. And I've had great experience at the Kansas City Fitness Summit. This year was great. A lot of the good stuff in my career has happened because I attended that 3 years ago. And the better events that I've attended, people meet each other, they hang out, they enjoy the social and networking side of stuff. So you'll fit that.
You're just too nice. Basically, Greg's humble enough. He won't pull the rock star card on everyone. Just like leave on a limo afterwards. And
Well, I'm not going to say a name, but we had someone on our original list that had a bit of that rock star sort of attitude, and then ultimately rock starred their way out of our list, which I'm fine with. And no names.
I mean, honestly, dog, like that's a pretty big deal. Like, there's I'm not going to name names. There have been several people at events I've spoken at that have just pissed me off to no end.
Yep.
Because it's like, dude, I get that, like, the speakers are probably going to be the closest friends with like the other speakers because a lot of us know each other and whatnot. But like, dude, we're not the ones paying several $100 to come to an event. Like, get your head out of your ass and like actually spend time with the attendees and
set the tone.
Don't just like seclude yourself with the other speakers the whole time. Like that happens at so many events and it pisses me off so much.
And there's no value. And you know what? As someone who's going to host an event, I don't give a fuck about, like, I do give a fuck about the speakers, but I give a fuck about the people paying in the event itself and what kind of environment it's going to be. Because if it's going to be very segregated and people aren't going to get that experience, then it's not the experience I want. We can pay for anyone to come and speak and leave. Like, that's the model that's out there right now.
There's also another trend too, and there was an event that I was aware of. That event is no longer going through. I won't say what one. But there's a trend towards charging a VIP rate, which is usually double the attending rate, to be able to have lunch with, dinner with the speakers. And I'm not a big fan of that either. And I think it's a way to cash in for sure for the organizers. And I get the idea that you need to make these events viable to have them. But that's why I like events like Tim Arndt's Inland Empire Fitness Conference in Spokane in the spring, because Tim does a wonderful job of creating a VIP experience for everyone. And his speakers, they get in and interact with everyone. So there's no exclusive bullshit there.
Well, the speakers just like being around their audience, which is like when you leave and you have that, we'll call it the rock star mentality, it does, you don't really care much about your audience enough to interact with them. Because I think that's the big thing, is that it's like, we have fanboys, whatever, but like everyone just wants to meet Greg and say, hey, Greg, and just like shake your hand. And like, that's a big thing that does get lost in some of these things, and it does piss me off. So basically, we're telling you all the stuff to do. we just assumed you were going to do it, so it's perfect.
Yeah. So anyway,
I mean, we'll see. Like,
you could.
I am now Master Greg. That means that I'm big time, and I just don't have the time or the interest for the plebeians anymore.
Well, and
like,
your trap queens are going to be coming out too. You're going to see a completely different side of me, and just be prepared. I would love to see you try, to be totally honest. Like, what does that look like?
You know what's funny? Watch, he'll bring Trexler, and Trexler will be like wearing black sunglasses and a suit and just hand up going, no, you can't come talk to Greg. Now, thank God, like, Trexler's well built, but he's not a particularly large human, so I don't know how well he would do to stop
And then you have to yell at him, like, he screws something up, and you fucking, like, lose it in the middle, like, you're walking up the stage, everyone's watching, and he, like, trips, and you just, like, lose it on him, and he just, like, kind of ducks his head a bit. He's like, sorry, master.
We haven't seen
thing is, though, he has a low center of gravity, and he's a wrestler. Yeah. So don't let the size fool you. Like, he will go fucking honey badger mode on you.
Yeah, he's not a grizzly bear.
We haven't seen Greg's rider yet. His demands for when he appears. So watch out.
What? If someone fucking did that, I would put it out there.
I'm gonna have to pick the green M&Ms out of the fucking bowl or some bullshit like that. So let's go to the original question. So obviously you're a busy fucking dude, but yet you still make time for a few of these appearances each year. So why is that important to you? And what are some of the criteria that you need to check to even accept an appearance like this?
I don't know, man. Like, I just think it's fun. And the check boxes are that it seems like a fun event. And the check boxes for coming back are, did I have fun the last time I came to this event?
But that is good to know, though.
That's pretty much it. Like, the only events that I do like year after year consistently are the Fitness Summit in Kansas City, because that's very fun, and European Powerlifting Conference, because that's very fun. The other events that I've done previously, a pretty big thing is a lot of events don't make it to year 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Like, they just weren't profitable enough and they kind of fold up. So like that's happened a few times. I can only think of like maybe one like yearly event that I've spoken at before that I didn't get invited back to the next year. So maybe that was on me.
Yeah, you rock started.
And then and then like a couple things, like, you know, it just wasn't a good time. Like and it was a lot like what we were describing. Like the speakers were like segregated from everyone else, and like at one event, and I'm not going to name names, but like the speakers were like intentionally sequestered from everyone else, and I was like, dude, like I want to go spend time with the attendees. Like I'm sure that they have questions about the stuff I talked about, and the organizers were like, no, we're all going to dinner. Like you have to come with the other speakers. I was like, this is bullshit.
Really?
But yeah,
That's
so
awesome. Not awesome.
yeah, it's, but yeah, so I mean, basically, like speaking at events isn't a like significant portion of my business or anything like that. So like I do it if it's fun, and I come back if it's fun. Like that's literally my only criterion.
Well, a big thing, like, because we're pretty open about it, is like, and again, we had problems with some of the people that we had on our list, but like, speakers aren't making an enormous amount of money for these things. A lot of it is like honorariums or like just a small fee to have them come out, partially because the event is not about making a lot of, like, I know they're about making money, but they're about creating community, and I think that most people don't realize that. Like, if you get 10 speakers out to a summit type of thing, you can best be sure they're not making $3,000 each. So it's not going to be anyone's part of their business, because that's just not. It's like viable, but it's not a whole business.
It's a long game. So
yeah.
I'll for anyone listening who's considering this,
Greg's getting paid nothing. He's getting paid like literally peanuts. We're going to give him peanuts.
We're giving
and beer.
him beer, which is what hopefully he'll have fun and be drunk and then want to come back. But I'll go through the list of speakers we've got, because some of the speakers are not necessarily first-timers or almost, but people we want to give opportunities to that we felt were really great, some local people. So that includes our friends Hannah Gray, who's one of our partners in this, and another guy, EJ Paris, who's a really widely respected
Olympian.
He's Olympian.
Yeah.
Widely respected local trainer. We're bringing in Mark Morris, who's a PhD in Saskatchewan, who's got a powerlifting background. And then we've got some people who are, you know, more established on the speaking circuit or upcoming, someone like Megan Calloway from Vancouver. Lee Peel, they're very close friends. So Lee is the other American that we're bringing up. And Lee is an industry legend. Brian Cron, another industry legend. He's coming up from Calgary. We've got Lee Boyce coming in from Toronto. And then, of course, we have, I mentioned Carolyn McDonald. So she spoke at the Kansas City Fitness Summit. That was her first engagement. And she's just exploding. Like, people are asking for her on podcasts. We've had her on. And so I think her career arc is going to go nuts. And then Dean Somerset, one of our partners in it, Dean is presenting. So that should be a really good lineup. We're pretty excited about it. So here's something kind of interesting. There's no guarantees we can pull this off. So don't quote me on this, but Christian Thibodeau, again, who's Canadian, saw our lineup, messaged me and said, hey, this looks amazing. If I'm like free that weekend, could I participate? And Christian's a pretty goddamn big deal in our world.
And Andrew's like, no.
Oh, shit.
He's like, no.
And so Christian and I have been chatting about it. If there's a way we can squeeze him in, we'll try for sure. We're definitely going to talk to him about having him here, because we're intending on doing it year 2, assuming it goes well. We think it will. So, but there's no promises about Christian. But that would be really cool as well if we could add him to the lineup because Christian's pretty.
We'd have to we'll get rid of Greg to replace him.
I mean, that's perfectly
makes sense. It's the Canadian thing. Sorry, man.
I'm just pleased by the fact that you have two American speakers and they're both from North Carolina. That fills me with state pride.
That wasn't planned. Either.
Was not intentional, not whatsoever.
Sweet.
So, no. And
I mean, North Carolina is the best state fitness industry wise in the U.S. So I'm glad that we're finally getting recognition.
you guys are the best collegiate basketball state for sure, right? You got all the tobacco road schools.
Those two things are correlated.
Cool. So let's pester you about being so busy and all. Have you read anything noteworthy and share-worthy lately?
Let's see. I read stuff all the time. So
Research.
I can just tell you what the 3 mass studies I'm doing this month are. They're all pretty cool.
Yeah, go ahead, scientist.
So one of them is looking at the ergogenic response to caffeine in men and women. So most of the research on caffeine in the context of exercise has been conducted in men. And only one previous study has actually directly tested both men and women. And it gave them different testing protocols for whatever reason, which is kind of weird. So this is the first study directly comparing men and women in the same study with the same testing protocol to see if caffeine is similarly ergogenic in men and women. And it was. Let's see. So next study. Okay, so the next study is pretty interesting, and I'm actually working on a Stronger by Science article about this topic as well. But it's from Barbalo et al., looking at whether adding single joint training to a program already consisting of adequate levels of multi-joint training, whether that increases strength and hypertrophy.
That's a good idea.
And yeah, so the interesting thing is you hear that and you're like, well, no shit, of course it's going to help. At the very least, it's going to help you build more muscle. But this is it's the 6th study, I believe, looking at this experimental question. And overall, to this point, it seems so most of the individual results in the studies have been null findings. So doesn't seem to improve strength gains, doesn't seem to cause additional hypertrophy. So I'm reviewing this study for mass, and I'm also working on an article for Stronger by Science, kind of looking at all of those results together to see if well, okay, if we look at the big picture, does it seem like anything's going on? Because the thing with individual studies is they may be underpowered and have null results, but if you look at the entire body of literature, everything still clearly leans in one direction or the other. So that's the second one. And then the last one is it's looking at kinetics and kinematics in the squat and the timing of activation of different muscles with loads ranging from 30% of your max to 100% of your max. It's pretty interesting, honestly. So one of the cool things is that apparently your quads have different timings of peak activation in the squat. So the first one that really fires hard coming out of the bottom of the squat is your rectus femoris, which isn't what I would have expected. Followed by your vastus medialis, and then your vastus lateralis has peak activation closer to lockout. I thought that little tidbit was interesting because oftentimes if people have knee tracking issues and they're prescribed exercise to get their vastus medialis up to snuff, it'll be kind of terminal range knee extension stuff, which very, very well, I don't know. I haven't looked into that research. That may be good for kind of single leg type work. But in terms of the context of the squat, the vastus lateralis is the one that reaches peak activation the latest in the lift, which I think is pretty neat. A cool thing about this study, I'm not going to spoil all of the results, but a cool thing about this study is most research looking at kinetics, kinematics, muscle activation, and the squat, it's kind of like has people lift different loads the way they, I guess, feel like they should, and looks to see how things change as loads increase. This is the first, I believe, that has actually like instructed people like lift every rep as fast as possible. So I think that makes it a lot more applicable in a strength training context, because that is something that you tend to cue people like that's a West Side special that people have picked up on, and we know that that's a pretty good thing. Like even with submaximal weights, lifting them as explosively as you can. And so I think that the results of this study are probably more applicable to day-to-day training than previous research that's looked at a similar question.
Okay, that's going to be a lot to read. I'm especially interested in the second one and the third one when you get the articles out.
I was going to say, something cool? They review it in mass. That's why you don't have to read it.
So that leads into.
I did just give away like
everything.
A decent amount. I mean, probably like 40% of the findings. Like it's not like I'm paywalling all of this.
So, you are a rock star. Just like literally give 40%, so we have to pay. Like, damn you.
Well, no, I think it's pretty much worth it. So
no. I mean, to be honest, the single joint, multi joint stuff, like the article on Stronger by Science will be free and will probably be.
Oh, you don't think
more in depth?
If anyone has a problem with how much you're charging, like it's really not that much for, again, the amount of work that is put into it. You're doing all right. I'm not. You're good. If you don't buy it and you bitch about prices, like, you got a fucking problem, because it's like literally nothing. Like, it really, in the big scheme of things, it costs absolutely nothing. Because to actually go read that amount of research and go to school, like, good luck with that. That's my plug for you. So just don't be cheap. Cheap for good information, and it's good. Before we leave, because I know you got to go to a podcast, where can everyone find you and find your work and find Mass and everything you kind of have to offer?
So all of my free content is on strongerbyscience.com. If you are interested in checking out Mass and potentially subscribing to it, it's strongerbyscience.com/mass. If you want to check out a free issue before you subscribe, it's strongerbyscience/mass-best-of, I believe, or you can just Google best of Mass and it should pop up. On social media, probably most active on Facebook, also on Instagram. So if you are interested in pictures of food and my dog and occasionally me lifting weights, that's just at Greg Nuckols. If you're more interested in like actual fitness information, we now have an actual Stronger by Science Instagram account that is at official Stronger by Science, I believe. All is one word. And that's about it.
Greg, thank you. Like, this was actually one of the most fun episodes we've ever done. There's a lot of ridiculously awesome shit in here. Thanks. We're looking forward to seeing you in September. And for everybody listening, I'm hoping by now you guys are following or know who Greg is. If you don't, I mean, come on. Like, did you listen to the last fucking hour? Seriously, like, go and check this dude out and his work. And if you are interested in coming to our event, then you can find Google Evolve Canadian Strength Symposium. You'll find it on Dean's social media. You'll find it on mine. We're going to continue posting about it. So,
and hammer him with questions. Like DM him 10 questions a day.
Then the more stupid and pedantic question, the better. No, go check out his podcast because it's really great. So hopefully you'll turn this one off now as opposed to halfway through, and then go and download and check out, subscribe to Stronger by Science podcast. Thanks. We really appreciate you making the time for us.
All right. Thanks for having me on, guys.
See ya.
Shut up and sit down.